Hello, Dani, and welcome to a brief introduction to Series 13, Episode 11 in Flintshire in Wales. It was one of those sites where it was wet and windy, and you wonder why the Romans ever decided to go up there. Natural resources is one answer, but we were looking for a bathhouse. And as a Roman, I could only imagine that if you were in Wales, a warm bathhouse at the end of the day was a fantastic thing to look forward to. But often these obvious things are not very easy to find, and I think it was quite a struggle, that program, to find something really meaningful. What was your impression of it, and why do you think it's an interesting one to watch?
Well, I think what's interesting about this one is that it had a lot of promise. There've been earlier excavations, and various Roman finds have been turning up. Some really nice finds, lots of nice pottery. There were a couple of brooches, Roman brooches, hairpins, all kinds of things that have been turning up over the years. And in particular, a dig that was done. I think it was back I think there was one in the 20s, one in the 60s. And they'd done a couple of trenches and kind of done a bit of dot to dot. So in particular, one of the walls that they'd found, they conjectured that it was curving, and they thought they might have an apse, which is kind of a bit like a semicircle, which is fairly kind of standard for Roman or British or Roman bathhouses. And so they kind of did a bit of a dot to dot, pieced things together, and thought that they had a bathhouse. I mean, it's fair enough. They were going off the information that they had. In fact, actually on the programme, there's a fantastic example of some really early geophysics where, it was so early that they didn't even have a proper printout. They'd actually stippled it with a pen or a pencil. I think you'll see John talking about that. And in fact, actually, it was actually quite accurate. But the thing was, when Time Team went back, to this site full of promise, they started to struggle. And that wasn't just because of the weather. I mean, you'll see, like, poor Phil, how he kind of managed, and the rest of the team, to sort of dig in that mud where you're slipping around in the rain. Fantastic job. But started to see that actually it probably wasn't a bathhouse. And they did find lots of walls, but they weren't substantial enough for a Roman bathhouse, which you'd expect to be kind of like pretty chunky. Only one of the walls was, and they started to think that actually what they had were various enclosure walls. And there's a brilliant bit where I think it's the end of, I'm not sure if it's the end of day 1 or 2, when people, the team are all down the pub, and Tony says to Phil, what do you think about your wall? He says, well, it's not straight, it's not curvy, it's just a bit wiggly. So you sort of sense that frustration of spending a couple of days in a muddy trench trying to figure out what was going on, and slowly realising that it isn't a Roman bathhouse.
So as recommended viewing goes, I think it was a good example of the honesty of Time Team. Yeah. That I often felt with sites where there seemed to be a large amount of information that other people had found at some point in the past, usually accompanied by some sort of dotty drawing, join up the dots drawing, as you called it. And I think from that point of view, it was a good example of our persistence on a site that wasn't exactly obvious. We sort of got somewhere in the end, but you'll have to watch the programme to find out. So, Dani, summarise, watch this programme because?
Watch this programme because I think it's a really good and interesting example of revisiting archaeological sites and what applying new technologies and thinking about things in different ways can demonstrate with modern archaeology.
And I think it's worth watching just for that scene in the pub where I think Phil showed Tony a die and had some comments to make about walls. That was a memorable pub moment, I think.
Definitely, yeah, definitely. I think it's worth watching it just for that.